Let's look at Lawrence Kohlberg. So we've talked about human development, psychosocial development in the brain, but now we're looking at moral development. So psychology, we study human behavior. In this video, we're going to talk about how we study moral behavior. Like, how do we gauge what's right or wrong according to theories under Lawrence Kohlberg, which is the most popular theory. So Kohlberg does an immense amount of studies on morality, and he tries to understand how we develop over time, what is right or wrong, and how we act on this. He's building on the theories proposed by Piaget, Jean Piaget, and trying to make it kind of clean cut and say that there's some universality, meaning that this is across the board for everybody. And he breaks it into some levels to kind of break it down, label it, and make it clear for us to understand. So the first or lowest level, he says, is punishment. So we see things in terms of pleasure, seeking orientation, or punishment. So this is kind of ages 7 to 10, very young children, and he calls it pre-conventional morality. In pre-conventional morality, we make decisions based on avoiding punishment or receiving a reward. So, for example, my son, I'm trying to constantly model to him and try to teach him to think outside of punishment and rewards. But sometimes, like he can be difficult to get out of bed to go to school. So I'll have to be like, Giovanni, if you don't get out of bed in the next 5 minutes, I'll give him a choice. You're going to lose TV today. And then he'll snap out of it, or he'll jump up and he'll respond. But he's not necessarily getting out of bed because he thinks it's right or wrong, or understanding really thinking about all the complex reasons on why going to school is so important to develop your mind, build relationships with your friends. He's not necessarily thinking about all that. He's probably just jumping out of bed because, for the most part, he's thinking on a pre-conventional morality level where my dad is going to take away the remote and I won't be able to watch TV tonight if I don't get out of bed and go to school. So that's low level, and people can operate at this level even though they're not 7 or 10. Unfortunately, there's grown adults that still think on this level. They see things as punishment, and you'll see a lot of this approach and this moral reasoning maybe like in a prison or an institution where people are really just doing things based on consequences, direct consequences, like they're going to lose playtime or TV time, or they're going to, you're doing operant conditioning. You're taking things away, negative reinforcers. You're giving things, positive reinforcers. But that, he thinks, is actually the lowest level of morality. Now, when we move up a little, he says that, and this is, we call the good boy, good girl orientation. And this happens from 10 to 16-year-olds. And this starts to change around your junior year, according to him. So sophomore, junior year, when people turn 16. And he argues that in conventional morality, you're just learning society's rules and morals, and you're just reflecting what your parents, your religion, your church teaches you, and you're doing what is right. And you do it a lot because you want to please your parents, or you want to please the teachers, or you want to impress the police officer or firefighter and other people in authority. So you're doing what is right as seen as a good boy. So, for example, if I ask my son, like, hey, will you grab me a glass of water? Well, he might just do it because he wants to be a good boy. He's trying to impress me, or he'll work hard at school so that he hears that, oh, you did a good job, or what a nice kid, And he's doing it not so much because it's the right or wrong. It has more to do with pleasing authority. And parents are authorities, such as teachers and police officers and principals and ministers and priests and so on are seen as authority figures. That's conventional morality. Now we're starting to move up the ladder. So we did this quandary in class. You could read it for yourself. I'm curious of what you would do and why. And then I want you to see if you could kind of place where you are in terms of what morality you're using, what level. So he would give these quandaries, these moral hypothetical situations, and see how people react to them to kind of decide where they're at in terms of their moral, logical reasoning and how developed they are. Now, level 3 is basically what we call the social contract orientation. This is post-conventional. Now you're getting out of that good boy, bad boy thinking, or good girl thinking, and just doing things to please authority. And around 16, he argues, and maybe this is earlier now, since society's kind of changing quicker. You guys, teenagers start to kind of like really question things. They kind of look at societal rules. They see them as important, and authority is important. They understand their parents have power and teachers and so forth, but they're also starting to develop their own set of values, and they generate occasional conflict. So, for example, at my school, the big debate is if we're going to school uniforms. Well, I'm not sure that's a moral question or not, but some people may think it is. But some teenagers might say, hey, wait a second. And this is where he comes in. What about our individual rights? Don't I have a right as a teenager to express myself and wear whatever I want to school? And then the authority might be like, no, but this is for the best of the safety of everyone if we don't wear certain clothes, or if we all conform or we all look the same. That could reduce things like kids feeling out of place because their parents can't afford Greek the Freak shoes or LeBron James shoes or Jordans because they're so expensive. And that makes the kids feel more apart. And also, maybe they just wear the same clothes. So this discussion, you're starting to go into individual rights versus the social contract. This is a big discussion you have in government, and seniors generally have to write about it in English. But what is the balance between our interest and society's rules? And then you get into really complicated questions. The social contract is the people, between the people, the citizens of America, and the government. So government, or at least government officials, can break the social contract. I think we all agree that just because somebody's in government doesn't mean they're a good or a bad person. They can themselves break rules and even as an authority act against those. Now, the next one, and this is what he says is the highest stage, is you get all the way up to stage 6. This is the highest stage, is this idea of individual principles. So this presents the highest stage of moral development in Kohlberg's model. In Kohlberg, he involves believing in universal principles of justice. So I used to do Model United Nations. Anybody that's really in the government, they have what are called universal principles of justice. Now, this is relatively new to Kohlberg at the time, but now that's something we all talk about. So in my class, we've watched video, or they go to Canada, and there's these kids that are skipping school smoking cigarettes outside of a Taco Bell. But the guy, the interviewer asked them, like, what do you think about medical care? Do you think that people should have that? And they say, oh, yeah, it's a human right. Well, they're thinking based on principle that they are okay with even paying for money for make sure everybody has mental and health care. And we talk about psychology, how important health care and mental care could be even more important than physical care. You won't get your physical care taken care of if you don't get your mental care. That they are actually thinking to themselves, if you're in this stage, that the money I pay in taxes is nothing compared to the importance of individuals having their rights protected. And people have a right to live their life and have health. So they need universal health care. Now, he argues, at least he sees in America, that most people don't reach this level. They don't get to this level. They don't sit there and think to themselves, okay, the reason I go to school, it's a matter of principle, is that I get to school because I can learn and grow as a person, and then I can contribute to society and help others down the road and raise my own family, and I can contribute to and help others. Now, some people may, hopefully people that go into professions that work with, that they say it's a calling, and that's actually one of his test questions, kind of like, is this a calling? Like being a minister or a priest or a teacher or a principal or a lawyer that wants to help people, like a Barack Obama kind of attorney, where he wants to do civil rights laws, and protect people even if they're indigent or poor, that they're really getting the principles. Obviously, Martin Luther King's here. He even argues that he makes a moral argument that if a law is unjust, it's no law at all. Meaning, he argues that if the law itself infringes on individual rights and even if the society or government came up with it, that's breaking the social contract. and that in fact is wrong, and that we have a moral obligation to refuse to follow laws that hurt people. Like, for example, slavery was legal at one point. Discrimination is what he's talking about, was legal. You could discriminate based on people's skin color. Some people have brought up this on sexual orientation. If somebody's homosexual or bisexual, do they have universal principles and human rights? Well, that's a good discussion to have. Shouldn't they be treated the same as everyone else? Well, then that's a stage 6 discussion you're having, and we're thinking about protecting their rights regardless of their sexual orientation, their skin color, their religion, and all their gender, their sex, all of these qualities. So you can kind of see here's some of the levels if you need to go back on it. Low level is punishment, you're avoiding it. Stage 2 is kind of you're getting your favors in there. You give me this, I'll give you that. Just quid pro quo stuff. You do this, I'll do that. Scratch your back, Giovanni. If you go get me a cup of water, I'll get you a cup of water later, kind of stuff. Or I'll buy you something. All right, good boy, bad girl, or good girl, stage 3, and then law and order. Now, this is where he says most people are stuck. Most people, he says, get stuck on stage 4, law and order. So most of us, we make our decisions based on if it's against the law. So for example, speeding. Why don't we speed in a car? Well, he's going to argue that most people only get to the stage 4 conventional level of morality, and they're going to argue the reason I don't speed is I don't want a ticket. That's stage 1. But the second part is it's against the law, so it's wrong. You shouldn't do it. It's against the law. Now, somebody that's maybe in a stage 5 or 6, they're going to say, no. The reason you don't speed is that the government has figured out that if you go past 40 miles per hour on this road, you're much more likely to get in an accident, to kill, to hurt somebody, and that could affect other people's individual rights and their right to raise their family and live their life and be safe when they drive the road. Or you don't do drugs or smoke marijuana while you're driving a car, because that is really hurting or could risk other people's lives. And even if somebody doesn't value their own life, they could hurt me, and I have a son, or somebody's driving their children, or a kid's running across the street and they hit with the car because they're doing drugs. That's getting into very high levels of principles of you're breaking the social contract. And the social contract is, well, we could argue about whether or not drugs are morally right or wrong, but I think that we should agree that doing drugs and getting in a car, which is, a 5,000-pound weapon arguably that could kill somebody or hurt somebody, that brings in all kind of other discussions about universally it's wrong for you to do that. It's against our ethics. And then here's another moral quandary, and this is probably one of the most famous, the prisoner's dilemma. What do you do? And I'm curious of what you chose. And then the next part, I want you to kind of rate, where are you in terms of your moral thinking according to Lawrence Kohlberg's approach? So here's the stages. You want to fill that out on your sheet? So let's go to psychosocial development. Now, the other kind of development we talked about outside of morality is psychosocial development. Psychosocial development is really talks about how we develop, and it says the research has really indicated that boys by the age and girls by the age of 7, they start to believe that gender is fixed. They start to perceive that male should act one way, female should act another. That's a fixed mindset. We've talked about fixed and growth mindset with Carol Dweck. Fixed mindset, people think that people are smart and that's the end of the story, or they're dumb. Growth mindset, people say, no. We all can learn, but if I work really hard, I can learn more. And if I fail, I can learn from that. Well, somebody that doesn't believe in a fixed gender could say, well, the boundaries of how a man or a woman acts, or a boy or girl, those are created by society. It's a social construct, and it changes, actually. So we'll look at some examples. Now, somebody that gets older, sometimes the lines blur. And then the stereotypical, which means what society or generally what people create as a schema of what a man or a female acts like in society, you can create what's called androgyny. Androgyny is somebody that could be maybe assertive and aggressive, which I think you think of people that are assertive, aggressive as masculine, right? So Hillary Clinton ran for president. We have still never had a female president, but one of the claims against her, even though she won the popular vote, was that she was the B word. So women that are assertive or aggressive in our society, might be called the B word, where if somebody's gentle or nurturing, and you can see this as examples, for example, in elementary school. I don't know how many of you guys have had elementary school teachers that are males, but probably not a lot. Well, that would be an example of nurture and gentle nurturing. Are males supposed to be gentle and nurturing? And how many boys, their dads, don't necessarily kiss or hug and love them as much as maybe they should because of the research? And there's probably a lot because males are taught in our society you can't cry in public. That's emasculine. Women can, females can. Males are not supposed to be around children unless it's their own kids because that's kind of weird. And people, my students have even said, you guys have said that, well, they immediately, they're taught that they fear the male as a pedophile or somebody that's going to hurt children. And that's not true. There's plenty of men that have children and that love and care about other kids, but they have to really watch their boundaries because in our society, gentle and nurturing is seen as a womanly feature, not masculine. And then here's a good example. This is Shiva the Destroyer versus, and it's kind of androgynous. Is she a boy? Is she a girl? Or is he a he or they? And on the left, that's a Bardacci. And Bardaccis are spiritual leaders in indigenous American culture, and they blurred the lines, but they're very revealed, respected for their position, and even represented the tribes in the American government. And then finally, Albert Bandura argues that not only violence and us acting it out, that's how we reward the masculinity and punish femininity. And boys are really bad about this. I hear a lot of males use the word like you're being gay or you're gay as like a bad thing. And what they're doing is they're perpetuating these cycles under Bandura's theory that we're making that a bad thing. And gay is acting like a girl or running like a girl. Those kind of sayings are very, very dangerous. And Bandura says that this was what keeps these systems going. We see this and model this.